Welcome to Real Estate Meets AI, the podcast where we explore how AI is reshaping real estate, construction, and the built environment one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Sandeep Ahuja, CEO and co-founder of Cove, a full-service architecture practice that runs on AI to drive smarter, faster, and more innovative outcomes. As an architect and building scientist, I've spent the past decade helping teams turn design challenges into data-driven wins. Now, I want to get into the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of real estate, AI, and data that my industry peers and I have cultivated, applying behind-the-scenes knowledge to the trends we see in action today and deliver it directly to you. This podcast is about demystifying AI in real estate, pulling back the curtain to show you the real system, workflow, and decision-making that power our built environment. In each episode, I sit down with industry leaders, trailblazing developers, and tech innovators to unpack ideas, lessons, and real-world stories. You'll hear what's happening, what's working, what's evolving, and what it really takes to lead in an AI-driven world. This is the Real Estate Meets AI podcast. Joining me today is Antony Slumbers, a global recognized PropTech visionary speaker and the mind behind one of the most influential thinking in real estate transformation. Antony isn't just talking about the future. He's been building it since 1990s when he created some of the UK's first commercial property websites. Fast forward to today, he is teaching generative AI for real estate people, advising company boards on transformation, and is consistently ranked as one of the top PropTech influencers globally. Antony, thank you so much for being on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, except you told everyone how old I am now.
Oh, no.
Let's go anyway.
That's right. Let's go ahead anyway. Let's start with our famous AI meter. So that's basically your perspective from a 30,000-foot view. How far do you think the industry has come? So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being we're still just tipping our toes in AI, to perhaps we're already in a transformational approach where it's truly tipping point, where AI is fundamentally reshaping how we think, how we work. Where do you think we are, 1 to 5?
I think we're actually probably tops a 2 at the moment. The reason for that is I do think we are approaching a tipping point, but we're very much still in the early adopter land. I mean, it was interesting last week or the week before when GPT-5 came out, that Sam Altman said that only 7% of people who use the paid version of GPT had ever used one of the reasoning models, even though it was just a switch and it was available. So only 7%. So I would say maybe 10% of the real estate industry is absolutely up to speed and is really leaning it. And that's pretty much across the board in business of people who are really on it and leaning it. So 10%. Well, the rest, there's lots of talk, but it's interesting. I mean, this week, MIT came out with a report saying 95% of AI pilots had failed, and everyone was jumping up and down and saying, oh, my word, you see, this is useless. But to be honest, transformations always fail. I mean, the average failure for a change management program in a business is very, very high. But a lot of the problem is that the bulk of people are thinking about this as putting some cream on the top of their cake, whereas they should be thinking about baking a new cake. And that's why I think we're only 10% of people realize we need to bake a new cake, not just put some more cream on the top.
Oh, that's such a great way to think about it. I want to take that a little bit further. So when you say that there's only 10% of the folks that are perhaps thinking that, oh, we need to bake a new cake, of the 10%, if you had to take a wild guess, how many are actually actively finding ingredients and making a new cake or still thinking about it?
I think there certainly are people who are doing a lot of really good work. The trouble with a lot of this is it's hidden. And I was talking to the head of AI for one of the very big real estate services firms last week. But I put out a LinkedIn post saying, why do we never hear from XYZ? And that really caused quite a stir. Got in touch with me and said, I want to show you what we're doing. And they are doing some really, really good stuff internally. But he said, we never say anything and we don't put it out and we never share screenshots because when we've done that before, our competitor steals them straight away.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. So we are really concentrating on internal.
Yeah.
It's just you don't know what's going on. And he showed me some of the stuff they were going on and it was serious work.
Yeah. That to me, I will say I resonate immensely with, because obviously, as an AI architecture company ourselves, we're not selling a platform, we're selling services, the final output. So if you go to our website, guess how many demo videos you see? None. If you go to our website, guess how many screenshots of a product do you see? None. But what you do see is what comes out of it. Because at the end of the day, we're not selling people software. Why keep trying to show them what we're using to give them what they need? I think it makes a lot less sense.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good and sophisticated attitude towards what really matters at the output at the end of the day. We don't need another dashboard, please. No more dashboards.
Agreed entirely. I really like your perspective on that. It also sounds like a more global kind of approach and a much more global attitude. Many of the conversations we've had on this show have been very US focused, which is why it's really nice to kind of hear the more global perspective from you on it. So I am curious. Obviously, you've been extremely vocal about real estate being forcibly moved from being a rent collector to being a service provider. And that in itself is a massive mindset shift. So, in your view, what percentage of the industry truly gets it? And for those who do understand it, what does success even look like in this new space as a service world?
Well, this is a war that I think has been won. I think pretty well the whole industry has now internalized. I mean, I'm mainly talking from an office background because that's my main area. But certainly across the office sector, pretty well the whole industry has internalized the idea that the customer is the occupier of the building as opposed to the investor. The investor, in a way, is still the customer, but the only way to give the investor what they want is to look after the customer in the first place. So I think it is pretty internalized, except, funnily enough, from the investment community. Definitely the investment community is still hankering for, please can I have Google on a 25-year lease with upward-only rent reviews? They can't get past long leases, upward-only rent reviews, institutional-grade tenants. So every time I talk to people, they say a lot of the problem is when they get to the investor side, that they're talking about these new ways of working, new services and products that they're delivering, and it's like a glazed look from the investors. You know, they just well, show me a spreadsheet, show me some numbers. But where I think it has really worked is I just read this morning a report about US law firms in London, and they are expanding like crazy into bigger and much better places and paying record rents, taking record amount of space. But the interesting thing is the space they're taking is pure space as a service. It's the ultimate, it's the best space. It's the space that makes them attractive to clients, acts as a magnet to potential talent, enables their enormously expensive employees to operate in the best possible way. I thought that was really interesting. So they're creating places that people want to go to rather than they need to go to, that are better than any alternative and enable them to do things that they could not do elsewhere. And that's what you need to do to get really institutional grade offices at the moment, because frankly, and the research points this out, something like 70% of people would say my office at home is better than my office at the office.
That's really funny.
Yes, but it's so interesting to see an industry which has a potentially troubled business model. So law firms, you know, are very amenable to AI, and there's lots of talk about not needing so many juniors. The idea of billing by the hour goes out when you talk about AI. You can't say it took me 3 months to do this due diligence when it took you 4 minutes. You can't do that anymore. So they've got a changing business model, but their response has been actually exactly what I've been forecasting for years, that in a paradoxical way, in a more technological world, the office becomes more important, not less important, but only if the office provides all this other stuff. I mean, there's simply a shortage of the best offices, and there are enough multinational companies, very wealthy companies, who simply want the best space, and there's a shortage of that. This is sort of the exception that proves the rule that the office is troubled. The overall office market is definitely troubled because most of the office market is not like the spaces these law firms are buying. But in terms of the industry internalizing that they have to produce things that people want rather than need, it's an update to where retail was 20 years ago, when suddenly e-commerce came along and retailers suddenly realized that they didn't have a customer that had to come to their shop. They needed to make their shop somewhere that people wanted to come to. This idea of having to make someone want something as opposed to people needing your product completely changes the way people think, I think.
Yeah, that's there's a few themes that you mentioned in there that are very close to my heart. One, as a business leader, when you talk about the evolving business model of the legal services, I take that very seriously because actually quite similar to the legal system, our architects, they bill by the hour and it's per the project. And if you say that you no longer need such a large team to deliver something so slowly because with AI you can do it faster, what is the new business model? I'm curious what you learned in your research, but at least where we've been hearing about a lot of success where services are being rethought of across the board, right? Not just legal system, not just architecture. It's value based and outcome based pricing, not hours based, because hours historically was really an arbitrary connection to value. And now it's just come straight to value. In many cases, I think that's way more direct to what the
Yeah.
customer cares about because what customer care if my lawyer spends 10 hours or 1 hour on something, honestly, I'll be glad if they spend 1 hour, even if the bill is the same because I had the answer faster.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're moving in terms of professional services to very much a bifurcated world. On one side, there's the luxury providers, if you like, the elite. And this is what we're talking about with these law firms. They are the very best of the best. So when people are going to them, they are remodeling their business plans around just dealing with the biggest, most complicated, bet the company type problems where the cost is not the point. The point is the brain power of the person you're talking to. But, it's a smaller, limited world. If you like, that's the luxury end of the market.
Sure.
For most of the market, I think there's going to be, and I wrote in my newsletter about this a few weeks ago, potentially a movement where what was a luxury service historically, a white glove service, if you like, becomes a commoditized service that everybody can have. If you think about the services that currently, or say in the last 5 years, you could provide to only the customers with the largest budgets, and you think, well, suddenly I can provide that service to everybody.
That I believe and agree with wholeheartedly. In fact, I've been calling it, I'm so curious to read it in your newsletter, which from what I understand is one of the most circulated newsletter on AI in the real estate. So would love to plug that if someone's already not a subscriber, be a subscriber. But the thing that I pull out from that is the democratization of whatever it is, the democratization of great design, the democratization of better legal advice, or whatever industry that you're in. I think it's that democratization that AI is bringing that is just so powerful.
Yeah, it's powerful, but it's also, I think, essential, because another post I wrote a while ago had the headline, "We need a bigger pie." Because if these technologies are making people much more productive, for a given unit of output, we will need less people.
Yeah.
So if we don't build a bigger pie, if we don't build a bigger market, then there is going to be a lot of pain. I always think about it with the iPhone. So, there's my iPhone. Well, Bill Gates can't buy a better iPhone than me. And in some ways, we need to think about most of our services like this, that
Yeah.
I can have as good an architectural service as someone with 3 more noughts behind their worth.
Totally.
And why not? And then the market becomes enormous.
Indeed,
You're
it
really
does.
talking about, okay, the price point is different, but the market becomes absolutely enormous and it raises the bar for everybody. And this always used to be the case. If you think about it, we live hugely better than kings and queens in the 18th century.
Almost definitely.
As, just normal people do. And there was always this story about there was a time where there was only one woman in the world who could wear silk stockings. And that was Queen Elizabeth I in 1550. She was the only person who could afford silk stockings. And now anyone can, this is the point really and this is a central thing within real estate. My mantra within real estate is we need to build a better built environment. We need to decarbonize it, and everything needs to be better. And you
Most
look
definitely.
around, and certainly in design sense, you look around and you look at some things. God, that wasn't designed. That's just been put up. That hasn't been
I
designed.
think we've all driven past those buildings, which we're like, oh no, why?
Yeah, exactly. But we are now at the stage where the potential to deal with this is there if we approach things in the right way.
Most definitely. The other theme, I find it funny, of the themes that we've had so far, I'm going to ask you, is not on my list of questions. Are you a dessert person, Antony?
A dessert
We've talked about cakes. We've talked about pies. I'm curious what other thing is going to come in additional parts of this podcast.
Funnily enough, generally no. Although if I could get profiteroles into a story, I would.
Well, we'll see where this one goes. Maybe there's another dessert you'll sneak into one of the answers.
Exactly.
So moving right along, obviously you advise company boards on transformation strategies. I'm curious, what's one example of PropTech innovation or AI application that you've recently seen that made you think, aha, this is exactly where the industry needs to go? And I think it's perfectly fine if it's tenant experience, building operations, leasing, data analytics. It can be any form of, yes, they did it right, but who's on the right track?
Okay, well, this is quite interesting, actually, because I'm being a bit naughty here, but I've recently been doing a lot of work on where are we going? Because a lot of my work and a lot of the courses is about what are the implications of this over a 5-10 year period. So I spend a lot of time thinking about where we're going. And one of the things that really stood out in my research over the last few days has been building data repositories. So they exist now, places where you put everything there is to know about a building, all the documentation, all the manuals, all the everything. But the twist on it, in terms of where we should go, is yes, we should have all that documentation, but we should also have live data in there as well. All the sensors and all the data that the building is throwing off immediately gets posted into the building's data repository. Then you get to a situation where, in order for that to happen, you would have to configure a building with enough technology that it would be very close to being able to optimize itself and constantly manage the user experience of everyone in the building. So the building would know enough about how it behaves and how it is operating and who is using it and what are they doing in real time, enough to be self-optimizing. And a byproduct of that is you then get this data repository where all of this comes in real time. So apart from being incredibly useful because it's a byproduct of enabling the building to really optimize itself to be the best, but it's also fantastic when you start talking about sales or lettings or investments, because there's none of this, oh, well, we're trying to build this building, but we've got to do 3 months due diligence. And does anyone have the energy consumption figures? Because they're all there. And they'll all be certified. How amazing would that be? I want to buy this building. I can know everything immediately.
That's how it should be. There's no reason for it to not be that way, especially anymore, except folks chose not to do that.
Yeah. Where I ended up with all this research in terms of there's going to be changing value proposition within real estate. So you look at what a lot of people are doing now, that they're using AI for leasing and pricing and lease abstraction and all that, which is absolutely great, and everybody should be doing that. But that's a short-term competitive advantage. In 2 years, everybody will be doing that. So that becomes table stakes. But what doesn't become table stakes is when you can organize and holistically view all your data. So not in silos, you can holistically view everything. And then you can also orchestrate all the tools needed to operate your buildings. So, we're increasingly going to move to all these individual tools or agents that are needed to deal with all the things we have to do in a building. But that needs a conductor. That needs, you've got an orchestra of tools and technologies working in front of you. Someone needs to orchestrate that. That's huge value.
And that's also the kind of problem. The only thing I'll add there, AI likes that problem. AI wants to organize all the data in a clear to understand form and it wants to connect it. Those are the easiest to do things with AI.
100%. And the third point that comes out of all that is trust. It is actually being able to stand behind and have automatably certified data at every point. It is what AI is good at, but there's quite sophisticated human skills needed on top,
Of course,
to bring all that together. And that's where new value points are going to be, because lots of the stuff we're doing now is just improving what we've already done, and everyone's got to do that. So where do you move to find new value? And you just keep moving up the stack. It's the ultimate, what's the point of the human when we've got all these machines? And the humans are there to tell the machines what to do and to create the machines and curate the machines.
and what problems are worth, like figuring out what problem is worth solving. And I think
100%.
the more that we can define as a person, as a society, as a world, the problems that are worth solving, I think even as big of problems like climate change, which is certainly coming for all of us, I think it is solvable if we can all just agree that that in fact is a problem. And I do think we have the tools at our fingertips to solve it.
This point about understanding what is a problem that really matters and understanding what is a question that is really worth asking, or if you like, the super skills of humans going forward. Because on the face of it, you think, well, that's easy. There's nothing to that, but it's clearly not. What are the questions and what really matters about climate change? How do we even contemplate solving this systemic problem? That's what I think humans need to really try and push themselves. I often say that in an exponentially technological world, we need to be exponential humans, in the sense of we really, really need to work on our human skills.
We really do.
That are what differentiates us from the machines and what enables us to get the machines to do what we want. It's a big challenge, but it's also, if you look at the sort of work you've done, and that's analogous, if you like, to my live data room. It's not just doing what we did before differently. You genuinely are baking a different cake.
We certainly are trying. So I have one other more thematic question that I really want to ask before we switch things into a little bit more fun gear with kind of our fast facts, and we'll go do a rapid fire. But the thing that you're touching on, but I'd love for you to really share for the audience, because you have such a forward-looking insight towards it. So as we become better at being humans, or whatever that entails, what does our education system look like? What needs to change in our education?
It's very interesting, this. There's a wonderful chap called Ethan Mollock, who's a professor at Wharton. And anyone interested in entrepreneurship or AI should definitely follow him. He's one of the very, very best writers on AI, but he's a teacher. He's an ex-entrepreneur. He teaches entrepreneurship at Wharton, but he's a teacher. So he's very conscious of teaching methodologies. And what he says, and I think seems to me completely right, is the danger with these tools is not that they won't do what the tech bros say they can do, but that we can damage our thinking by using them. So if we offload our thinking to the machines, then we do get dumber. So one thing is, you have to be enormously conscious all the time that your job is not just to accept what it's just told you, but your job is to ask it a really good question, and then to critically consider its answer before you ask it another one. But in terms of education, he says we need to turn it the wrong way round. Everybody needs to use these tools, but you let them use these tools outside the classroom, but the classroom becomes where they validate their thinking. So instead of giving them an essay and everyone just copying this, I mean, they used to do this before, didn't they? With
Of course.
I've forgotten the name of the company, but you could just buy your essay straight off it. But he says, get them to use the tools to write the essay. Then you get them in person, and then you go, so Sandeep, what was so-and-so thinking when they said blah, blah, blah? And immediately that tests whether anyone has actually internalized the thinking. But if that became the process, you couldn't just offload it, because you're going to get asked about it. So we have to develop very, very good critical thinking skills, I think. I mean, I actually, just as a quick detour, I think there's 4 skills that everybody needs. And it frankly does not matter what you studied. I studied history and history of art, and I ran a software company for 20 odd years. It doesn't matter. You can do these things. But what you do need is, first, we're going to need really good human skills, as I said. Then we're going to need really good critical thinking skills, because you don't know if anything is true anymore and everything can be a lie. You need to critically think about everything. We need very good problem solving skills. So, how do I solve climate change? That's a hell of a problem. We need to think about that. And then we don't need to be data scientists, but we need to understand the basic concepts of data, volume, variety, velocity, veracity, with 4 V's of data. If you as an individual have those 4 skills, plus you're literate in using the tools, there's nothing you can't do. Those are exactly what you need to be able to work in a human and machine world.
I love that you have a beautiful 4-part bucket. So there you have it, folks. You heard it. You heard it from Antony here first. All right. Well, maybe we switch gears and go into the lightning round, where we get to learn a little bit more about you, not just all the wonderful work that you've done. So I'm curious, what technology that seemed impossible in the 90s do you now take completely for granted?
I'm going to be naughty again to do 2. One of them is streaming video on your phone wherever you are. And I remember when my son is now 28. I remember him when he was about 10 years ago. We were driving along in the car and he was moaning that he was trying to stream something on his phone and it kept cutting out. And I was saying, I can't believe you're complaining about that. The mere fact that you can do anything on your phone whilst we're traveling along is like magic. And now you go anywhere and you can stream. I mean, that really is magic compared to just 20 years ago.
Yeah, sure.
The second amazing thing, and it's something that I've wanted always, partly because of my history art background, the ability to point my camera at something and be told about what it is it's looking at. So there might be a building, you use mobile chat GPT, point it at the building and say, tell me about this building. Or there's an Italian company that's been building an application for use in museums where you can go around a museum and point it at the building and it will tell you all about the people in the building. So particularly if you're looking at something Renaissance like, you don't know what the story's all about. Who is Ariadne? And you can just point your phone. That's magic. The original thing that Larry Page said about what Google want to make all the world's information available to everybody. That was, and what were they? They started in 1997 or something like that. And we are there now. It is.
We're pretty much there. You can do about that.
It's truly magical. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So obviously you're consistently ranked as a top PropTech influencer. Besides your own blog, whose content do you read religiously to stay ahead of trends?
Okay. There's a number, but I'll just whiz through them. I read quite a lot of books. 2 really good books recently. There's a book called Apple in China, which is the history of Apple's manufacturing in China. And it's absolutely extraordinary and amazing. And there's another book called AI First by Adam Brotman and Andy Sack, which was co-created with an audience where they would write a chapter, put it out to their public, as it's like, taking commentary and then edit it as the way through.
What a cool process.
So there's 2 great books. I mean, I read a lot of reports. I follow all the obvious big companies, the McKinseys, the World Economic Forum. And actually, I tend to take those reports, put them, I've got a very long summary prompt, which does a really good summary, or I put them into Notebook LM and just get a podcast and I'll listen to the podcast in the morning as I'm wandering around the house. But in terms of actual podcasts, there's one called Acquired, which 2 people go through the history of big companies in enormous detail. I listen to the Artificial Intelligence Show, which is fantastic, comes out on a Tuesday. I listen to Bill Gurley's BGT pod. Bill Gurley is one of the original gods of Silicon Valley VCs. I listen to Benedict Evans' podcast and read Benedict Evans' stuff. The Dwarkesh podcast, which is very geeky, but he has really good tech guests on that. On Friday, Hard Fork comes out. It comes out of the New York Times. This and the Artificial Intelligence Show a sort of a review of what's going on. Lex Fridman's podcasts, very, very, very long, but he has some really good guests and he goes really into great detail. And then less commonly, There's a very geeky one called No Priors, which gets down into the weeds. And then there's Reid Hoffman's podcast Possible. Reid Hoffman, who started LinkedIn, etc. There's a property one in the UK called Property She, which is run by Susan Freeman, who's works for one of the big law firms over here, and she interviews lots of property people. But there's another one called Project Flux, which is run by a couple of project managers in construction, which is really good. So there's a ton.
That is a great list for probably this is going to be great for the audience. So anyone looking for a list, here it is. Okay, here's the last question, final takeaway. It's the $1 trillion question for real estate leaders, entrepreneurs, PropTech innovators, anyone that's listening. What do you think is the single most important shift in the mindset or strategy that they need to make to capture their massive piece of this transformation?
Okay, well, I think in terms of mind shift, I think you have to lean in hard to AI, but you also need to realize it can be an enormous force for good, but it's only going to be a force for good if we humans retain agency over it and actively work on using it to build a better built-in environment. It could go completely the opposite way, but you've got to lean in. This is a really important mega trend societal change that's going on, and we need to be curating it. Interesting, if you look at the surveys, the West basically fears AI, which is the opposite of Asia. If you look at individuals' attitudes towards AI in the West or in Asia, it's like something like 70% positive in Asia.
It has to be our movies. It always turns bad in our movies.
Yes, absolutely. But so we have a strange attitude there, not being clear enough in your own mind that the way to get great investment returns is to create assets that people really want to be in, as I was saying before. I love buildings and I love physical real estate. There's lots of people in real estate who couldn't care less about buildings and they're not interested in architectural design or anything. They're just interested. There's a big side of real estate which is just financial. That treats it as a financial thing and has no interest in the assets at all. I'm on the other side. I think we need to pay more attention. We want great architecture, we want great design, we want great user experiences, and everyone should be able to have it. And I'd love fundamentally for the industry to over-index on building a better built environment.
So let's have agency to build a better built environment. I love that. That is a great note to end on. Antony, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the show. All of the thoughts that you shared, all of the stories, the nuances, the anecdotes, I found them so meaningful. I definitely am walking away learning a lot more than I did at the beginning of the session. So thank you for being here and being so gracious with sharing your knowledge.
Sandeep, it's been an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Real Estate Meets AI podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the Real Estate Meets AI podcast on your favorite streaming platform and follow us on social media at cove.inc. Until next time, I'm Sandeep Ahuja.